Everybody. So I was just watching Matt Paperback Junky, and he made a video about asking what happens to your books when you die, which I thought was an interesting topic. And as somebody who, I have so many books, I honestly think that my cause of death will be my books falling on me and just burying me alive. and in like a year, somebody will figure out, oh, hey, I'm not there anymore, and they'll come looking for me, right? Because, yes, it would take quite some time for somebody to figure out that I was not alive anymore. So, my own personal experience is, obviously I haven't died, but when my mother passed away, she had a lot of books. She was a book lover, and I've said this before, she instilled that love of books and reading in me. And we always had a lot of bookshelves around when I was a kid, and I would always go and pick whatever interested me. So when my mother passed, now obviously you don't think that there is such a thing as too many books until you have to move 8 bookcases of hardcovers. So when she passed, basically, I went to her place and I was surrounded by all her stuff, and she wasn't there. And it was, obviously, even regardless of the relationship you have with your parents, when your parents go, there's a lot of complicated things going on. And I had a lot of alcohol, and I think I spent more time reading the books than I did packing them. But what I remember, there was one box of Anne Rice books that I gave to my niece. I got all her Stephen King books, which she had always said, that was like her legacy to me. And she passed away the week that Joyland came out, which I always thought, I'll always associate Joyland with the week of my mother's passing. So, and then her friends. Okay. She had this group of people who were, it's hard to explain what they were like, but there was a very weird vulture-like quality to them, where and most of the people in the group it was an actual, like a charity that helped out disabled people, and then they had different things that they did. And she had this one friend who was an expatriate American, bore a pretty close resemblance to B. Arthur, but B. Arthur was actually funny. This woman was just grim. And this lady, I don't know how to explain this. I don't know how to explain this without being too disparaging, but these people were not, I guess my mother called them her friends, but they just seemed like vultures waiting to descend on her stuff. Beyond that, I don't even know how to describe them. But anyway, so they got some of her things. And the rest of her stuff that I ended up taking home. I ended up taking quite a lot of her books and having to move a lot of her books. And my mother had this habit. She had a personal support worker who also cleaned out her bank account to the tune of about $2,000. And I called. I don't know if she just figured I wasn't going to notice, or I wasn't going to follow up where she was spending my mother's money. But what she would do is she would go to a store and spend, $100 and buy things like shoes. My mother was in a wheelchair and she was dead. Like, who buys shoes for a dead woman? And a bra. Like, what? And then they tried to say, oh yeah, no, that was what she wanted us to buy. And I'm like, how stupid do you think I am? What the fuck? And so I ended up calling her work and saying, there was an issue with the personal support worker. Somebody called me back, and her work never called me back, but this woman that ran the organization that my mother was involved with, she sat me down. She's like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. You got to call them off. You can't call her work. And I'm like, excuse me, she cleaned out my mother's bank account for $2,000. What do you expect me to do? But she ended up paying back half of it, so I didn't press the matter, and they paid for the funeral, so I didn't press the matter beyond that. I just was appalled at what, low-hanging fruit these people go after. But anyway, my mother had this habit. She would send her support worker out every month, and she would buy a book, and she would buy a purse. And then the support worker would have to figure out, where to put the purses. But I think that she put the purses away so well that my mother forgot that they were there. So she would go out and buy another one. So she must have had about 30 purses, and each one was bigger and uglier than the last. So at her funeral, we had a big table, and everybody could take a book and a purse. And so, like I said, I got the rest of her books. We gave away some of them. I know that some of them went to, I don't know if it was the Goodwill or what, one of the other people that kind of was involved with the charity got a box of books. They were like James Patterson and stuff. And a lot of them came home with me because, it got to the point where I just didn't want those people rifling through my mother's things anymore. Oh, and the worst thing, it was so annoying. So the head of the organization and the woman's daughter were there when I showed up, when my mother, it was the last week she was alive. And it was a pretty brutal slide off this mortal coil. I mean, it was... Her skin had turned yellow, her eyes, all the this pigment here that is white. Now, if that pigment goes, it actually is like a brown, mucky color. Her eyes were gummed shut. They had pulled all her teeth because of infection. And she couldn't talk. And everything was just shutting down. And in order to go in, you had to wear the Devo suits, the yellow smocks with the masks and gloves and everything because of infection. She just had no immune system left anyway. And this woman's daughter, she was standing there talking to my mother and holding her hand, and I walk in and she just gives me this look like you don't belong here. And I was thinking, I'm her daughter. Who I am to her will always be more important than who you are to her. Sweetheart. What the hell? She was what an awful woman to treat the person's family like that. Like, what the hell? I don't know, maybe they felt, maybe because I live in a different city and can't be by her bedside every day, they thought that somehow they were more important or something. I don't know. It was just a really weird situation. Yeah, and then she passed away. And where was I going with that? And yeah, I got her stuff. And oh, you want to hear something really weird? Excuse me. So the night she passed. Now, I've said this before. I don't believe in ghosts, but I've had enough contact with weird things and enough weird things happening around my apartment to think that there is something there, right? You can look at my poltergeist videos, and something, when everybody's quiet, my sister and my nephew are sleeping, middle of the night, I'm watching TV, and something goes flying at my door. There's something there. Is it a poltergeist? Is it some weird energy my sister's throwing off? Because it's always directed at me. Like, this thing absolutely despises me and is always very angry at me. But anyway, I think my mother was still around the first night. Even though she passed in the hospital, she, pretty sure she was still around her apartment. And she didn't like that I was sleeping in her bed. I kind of woke up at one point, and I could just feel this annoyance. So she wasn't angry, but she was just irritated. Maybe she wanted to, part of the routine was she should have been there at that time or something. And I was in the bathroom and I saw the curtains moving. And I was like, is that you? I kind of felt something. It's like, don't know. But then after that, she was definitely gone. Like she moved on. She wasn't ready to go, which is why she was so irritated. And I knew that just from how she was before, like the day I saw her, which was about a week before she passed. It was like, she reminded me of a turtle on its back. I know that sounds weird, but if you've ever watched a turtle trying to flip itself over and get up so that it can survive, that was the same energy, that completely helpless, but just holding on. But unfortunately, she just, her system was just too weak. She couldn't fight it anymore. And she's not ready to go. And that's why she was still around the first night. She was like, wait, I'm not done here. But after that, I didn't feel her after the first night. And then, that basically, her friends got some of her stuff. Some of it we gave away. Some of it went to her funeral. And the rest all came to my place. So now I have my mother's books and my books. I am probably going to have to move in the next, depending on how my eviction proceedings go. I mean, I could be out within the month. The property manager would have me dragged out kicking and screaming tomorrow, I'm sure. But hopefully I can get about 6 months more in the place where I live now, which is really too bad because it's the longest I've lived anywhere. It just isn't working out. So I expect I'm probably going to purge some of my books when I move, because when I do move, I am not going to be housed again. I've been priced out of every rental in this region, and I will most likely end up having to live in my car, which means everything's going to go into storage. So I expect I'm going to purge some things. What I'm going to do with them, I don't know. I think I can probably give some of them to charity if they're not too dusty, and we have a bit of a moth problem, so if there's nothing in them. I imagine some of them I'll have to recycle, and then the rest are just going to go into storage until I stabilize and settle somewhere. What happens when I die is, I can tell you now, my friends will come through and take what they want. My family will get what they want, and the rest will probably go to charity or be recycled. It's not that complicated. I think it's not that complicated a decision. I also think that, well, at least I hope. I have a bunch of anthologies that have included stories that I've written, so I hope that somebody will put them on a shelf somewhere, and that'll be my legacy. I mean, I don't have much of a legacy otherwise. I have these videos, I never had kids, I never got married, I don't have a house, I don't have anything. Eventually I will just, shuffle off, and that'll be it, right? And, I mean, not the worst thing in the world if you don't leave too much behind, because then you don't have to have all this stuff to deal with. And like I said, people just get strange about other people's stuff when they die. And I can't imagine actually leaving things behind, right? Which, again, sounds like a really awful, awful, negative, cynical, nihilistic kind of view of life, but it's not the worst thing in the world to start with nothing and to leave nothing. Anyway, that was a bit more grim than I expected when I started this video. I just wanted to answer the question of what happens to your books when you die, and that's been my experience. Dealing with my mother's stuff when she passed. I'll be back in a few days. I have a couple more reviews before the end of September. Hope you're reading lots of horror. Hope you have a great day.